Alright, good morning and welcome to today's live stream. So if you're new here, this is a series where I kind of begin my workday by painting, creating a color study, a landscape. I'm a firm believer in practicing and exercising your technique and your skill set, and creating studies like this really helps me learn as an artist and helps me grow and progress with my ideas. And I encourage you to grab some paint and join along. So as always, I have streamed my colors with the channel memberships, and I've shared my reference photo as well with the channel members. So this is going to be a nice sunrise over a creek, small river. And I'm using oil paints. They're Gamblin Artist Oils mixed with liquid impasto and some thinner. And I'm using Gamsol for my thinner. And good morning, everybody. Welcome to the chat. I see quite a few of you. Good morning, afternoon, wherever you are. So this is a combination of a couple different photos. And I always like doing things like this because it's fun to play with different ideas, and these are some of the things that I feel like I normally don't get to do when I'm working on my larger paintings. And although my larger paintings are kind of my true vision of my art, what's most important to me as an artist, it's easy to get kind of tunnel vision, and getting back to some simple landscapes, looking at a few different references, it's just a good way, like I said, to just study my techniques, practice my work. I think it's important to finish things as well. Those larger paintings, though I really enjoy telling the stories, they take a long time, and it's hard to work on some of those things that I think about when I spend so much time on one painting. And so this is just a really good way I feel like to improve and also just have some fun with it. Alright, so got the crick, indication of a crick here, and so I'm just adding some burnt sienna, just sketching it in. This is a half-inch Fox Squirrel by Dynasty, kind of an angled flat brush. And we got some clouds up in the sky, but maybe even before that, we've got some trees. And every time you hear that, I'm just getting a little more of my thinner on the brush. Just want to sketch out the idea first. It's also a really good excuse to do these shorter, more looser, expressive paintings. It's a good excuse to work on my drawing skills. I really feel like painting, sketching with very thin washes of paint like this, it just really helps me with my sketching. Helps me work on how I see things, how to interpret that with a brush. And in a way, it's just like working with charcoal, maybe. Got some clouds up here I'm going to add. Just need to know where they're going to be. I'm working wet on wet, all prima like this. I'm getting away from focusing on value in the beginning because I'm not going to let it dry. And so it's just going to kind of mix right into what I add to the canvas, to the panel here. And just on that note, I'm using a gesso panel. It's just a gesso board that a hardboard that I gessoed myself. But when I'm constructing my larger works, I get more in depth with the sketching process, and I'll let that dry, and that kind of helps me get into the values quickly, more accurately when I begin with color. But it's just not as important when I'm working wet on wet. Just kind of one session painting here. We'll see how far I can get today. We're going to have our sun right about there. Alright, and just a quick check on my composition. That's everything I want. About like that. I can actually take this makeup wedge and just kind of erase, rework a couple spots. So I'm going to try a different technique here with the clouds. I kind of have an idea to erase the clouds, and this is just another good reason why I think doing paintings in one sitting, it's why I think plein air painting can be so beneficial. It gets you to think outside the box, try new things. So I'm going to try something a little different with the clouds today and see if that can kind of be something that I can use and take with me for future paintings. Kind of the shore here. Okay, let's go ahead and just stick with that. Alright, wash off my brush. So what I'm going to do here is just start with the sky. And for the most part, I'm going to ignore the clouds. I'm not going to get rid of everything, but I'm going to start with this golden color. So just a quick overview of the colors. I have titanium white, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. I have cad yellow deep, cad yellow light, and I have cad orange, quinacridone magenta, and then I use burnt sienna, ultramarine blue to mix a black, and then I've just got some various colors that I mixed here. So this right here is white, cad yellow deep, kind of similar to perhaps a cad orange and yellow light mixed with white. Just not quite as, it feels more orange than yellow. It's got just a nice warmth to it. So I'm going to first just kind of use this color, go across here and kind of get the horizon established. And even though I know where those trees are going to be, this is kind of the different unique approach I'm going to take to all this. I'm going to ignore some of the details. So it's so difficult painting trees, and I'm always, not just trees, but things that are, whether it be clouds or trees protruding into the sky. I'm always looking for ways to simplify it for myself. And kind of ran into this idea the other day as I was working on my last study of winter landscape, the last live stream. And as I was playing around with it, I worked at it quite a bit throughout the rest of the day, and as I was playing with it, I used a smaller brush and kind of pushed against the grain, and it just lifted the paint right off, and it kind of exposed this warmth underlayer. It gave me an idea to use that to my advantage. And at first I was just a little startled and taken back, and I didn't really want to do that, but then kind of worked to my advantage. And so that's just one of the things that I think about, what takeaways can I gain from each painting. And it's why I like doing these color studies, something more simple. Just completing something just gives me these ideas. And oftentimes I just don't get as many when I'm working on some of my more focused, larger work. So this is some white with a little bit of blue, essentially. So I kind of just took the white, mixed it into the cad yellow deep, and essentially we're desaturating the top part of this. And we're going to keep that bright, vibrant yellow low in the sky. So again, I'm just going to be focused on color of the sky, not the clouds right now. And I'm keeping the paint thin. Again, a little blue-gray. A little white. And I'm going to pick up that same color, but this time I'm going to grab some magenta. Yeah, I like that. I want to keep the sky nice and warm. Just kind of go right to the opposite. I always like to kind of start low on one spectrum, the light warm colors, and then kind of go right to the opposite and then kind of work my way back in. So this is more gray than blue, but I kind of like that. A little bit lighter. Okay, I'm going to grab some more white and more magenta again. So as I get into the midsection here, I kind of want to warm that up and get a little bit of pinks and blend that into some of these colors in here. I'm actually going to take some orange, add that. It just kind of becomes a continuous mixing of color. Yeah, and that's a good color to bridge the gap. Kind of a nice peach color. And just fan it in together. And same thing over here. I think I can sneak by with a bit right on the top edge through here. Okay, it's a good start. Just dry off my brush, dab it off. I'm going to add a bit more. Here's kind of the same color I was using up in here. A bit more of the orange. Just kind of add that in. And then on the top edge, I think I want to sneak in a little more life to it right through here. So this is the part where kind of a unique approach to some clouds. Instead of focusing on the clouds and just ignoring the clouds altogether, still got an idea where they're going to be, but for the most part just kind of forgetting about them and focusing on some of the blends in my sky and what I want to accomplish with the color behind the clouds. Alright, now like that. I think I can get away with some more pink, however. Just like that. Okay, so I'm going to wash the brush. Yeah, transitioning from sunsets are always difficult because transitioning from these warm colors to cool colors, it can often get very greenish looking. And just using some magenta, bringing things to more of a grayscale is a good way to bridge that gap. So here's kind of the unique part. So I've got a smaller brush, just a brush I use for some small plein air paintings a lot of times. Just a small angled brush. It's got some stiffness to it. And I'm going to go kind of the opposite way. And I'm going to push. And every time I do that, I'm just going to dab it off with the towel. And I'm going to push out the excess. And it's not really, I don't got a lot of paint on right now. But essentially, where the trees are, I'm going to basically remove where the trees are going to be, and just kind of, I'm just picking paint back off of the canvas. And I think this would show up if you were using some darker colors, but the canvas is, or the board, the panel is somewhat the same color. And up top, you probably can be able to see it a little better, like so. Because it's the same color, you're not seeing a lot, but while the paint is still wet, it kind of just allows you to scrape off what you don't want. And so I'm just trying to think about the outline of some of these clouds, where those are, and just trying to push some of that excess paint off. It's very faint over here. You can see it a little better up here. And I'm just trying to build the idea of these clouds back in place. So normally I feel like I would go around the clouds because I don't want these colors to mix together too much. You can see that a little better right there. But I think this way is going to work good for me to be able to blend the sky how I want, not worry about the clouds, and then just kind of lift off the areas that I don't want and reveal those clouds back in place. Again, it's subtle, but I think you get the idea. before I go any further, I'm going to get back into the sun. And I'm going to start by just taking some white. And I think I want that about right there. So just pure white. Just kind of swirl it into the area. And I've got some yellow, cad yellow light and white mixed together right here, and just brighten up that yellow a bit. And just lightly start to fan that out. I'll pick up some more white and just brighten it up a bit more. And I'll kind of lose the intensity of the sun, but near the end of the painting I can add that back in. Kind of save the brightest of whites for last, and I tend to ignore some of those bright whites just to make things easier on myself earlier in the process. Just focus on a decently smooth blend. And I think I'm going to just going to brighten this area up just a touch right here. Kind of going underneath where I scraped away. And just adding a little more brightness. Okay, now I'm going to wash my brush. And dab it off. I'm going to start with this color, which is some dark gray mixed with some magenta and orange. And probably add some of this orange and white. Mix that together and see what that gives me. Just kind of start with that. I don't want to go to the bottom of my clouds just yet, just kind of the lower half, and keep the focus right there. Go up here. And so because I scraped away a lot of that excess, it really goes on easily. And just pulling down as I do that. Pick up that same color. A little bit of the orange and white. And in the same way as we've got light to dark with the clouds this way, we've got kind of light to dark as we get towards the edge of the painting further from the sun this way. So kind of right in between here somewhere. I probably got ahead of myself with the trees, kind of erasing those. I'll probably forget about what I erased, where those trees are, and we'll use that same method as we get further into those. All right. Now I'm going to take it's kind of just some blue-gray. I'm going to mix it right into what I just used and warm that up a bit. We'll try that. I'm kind of using the top edge of this brush, not the whole side of it, and just kind of swirling in the detail. Kind of allows me to take advantage of that, utilize that point. When I think about painting different objects, I think it comes down to not necessarily what brush I'm using, but how I rotate the brush, which kind of just manipulates the paint in a different way. And over time, I feel like I slowly build a relationship, not only with the colors, and with the brushes, but the way that I use the brushes. And kind of each brush is different for me. And kind of just find ways to swirl it to create different effects. And the thing about clouds, it does not have to be perfect. And a lot of times just the weird imperfections you might leave behind. So I'm just mixing just a kind of a darker version for this top cloud up high. Some of those weird shapes and patterns that emerge as you kind of work the board or the canvas, just kind of just leave those, and a lot of times they just sort of fall into place and your eyes make sense of it later. So I got some of this darker color, and I'm going to continue with that. And use it to just blend into the top side of some of these clouds. Get them a little darker. Really bring the focus to the sun. A little bit of that warmer color here, and just kind of get the bottom edge of this cloud blended in. All right. Now, I'm going to wash the brush again. And I'm going to focus on some of these highlights. Start with this just orange and white. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of this red color, which has got some red and, sorry, it's got some magenta and some orange in it. Get something that's nice and soft. I might just lighten that up. Nice pink, peachy color, just brighter than, just trying to step it up as we get closer to the sun. And some of this will just kind of blend right into what's on the panel already. We'll further lighten it up, soften it up. Just a nice, bright, reddish pink. Just creating some variety in these clouds. And I'm going to pick up the white and orange again, and it's going to be a little brighter. And start to use this for the bottom edge. Kind of right up against where I was scraping those clouds off. And just kind of wipe it off. I'm going to go back into that same color. And probably just lighten that up with some white, and then just add some magenta. Is this a real place? The river is. The creek was up by West Yellowstone, just right off the Madison. And the sky, both of which I took with just my point and shoot camera. I did share with the channel members, so if that interests you and you'd like to see the photos, and I've got lots of photos, I share all of them with the channel membership. But I'm just kind of combining these two ideas. I really like the sunset, which was from a sunset in the Badlands, North Dakota. And kind of makes it fun, because although these are areas that two spots I've been to, it kind of just lets your imagination run wild when you just kind of combine different ideas together, and it starts to separate myself from where I know where I've taken the photos, and just kind of starts to put me in a mind state of just kind of imagining something different maybe. Okay, wash off my brush again, and I'm going to take some yellow and white, kind of the color I started with, and I often like to save some of the highlights, some of the thicker paint for the highlights. And so now I'm starting to think about some of these highlights themselves, and it's just going to start to go on with more physical texture. That's really going to make them glow, and it's going to make the painting very painterly interesting. It really brings your eyes in when you have kind of some physical texture, and I really like to save that, reserve that for the brightest areas. So just letting the brush speak for itself and just guiding it. Light pressure, just letting the paint roll off on its own. Add more white to that. Just kind of picking it up mostly on the leading edge of the brush. Just letting it fall off. More white. Just kind of keep repeating that process. So it's not a perfect color mixture. They're kind of colors that are, the white is swirled in with the yellow. And I think it helps with some of the randomness. Clouds are just so random, and how do you paint randomly while at the same time, trying to focus on what you're doing? I think sometimes the color mixtures, just having them in itself more random and not mixed to perfection, sometimes that kind of helps with that sporadic look. And some of the color going on is almost the same as what's on there, but because it's thick paint versus the more of a thinner wash that I initially started with, it really stands out. Just dab off my brush again on the towel. And add some more white. Closer to solid white, I would say this time. And I'm going to pick up that orange and white again. Let's see what we got right here. Yeah. That's just a shade brighter. And I'm going to use that. Just further brighten some of these clouds as they get close to the sun. And close to those yellows. And I'm going to go back now to some of the darker cloud color. Just kind of mix up some of those same grays. Add a couple more clouds. And I think maybe even get a slightly darker color for some of the backs of these clouds up high. And as I go, I'll start to just add paint layers that are thicker than what's underneath. It's typically how I kind of progress with each painting. It's good to start thin, it's easy to make changes then. And now that I got the colors on here, because I kind of started thin with the shadowing of some of these clouds, it's easy to just kind of layer the paint over the top and just blend that in. Alright, let's stick with that, wash my brush. And before I get further into the sky, I'm going to move on. So that kind of just gets me in the right direction. Now, kind of the same way that I did some of these clouds, I'm going to use this brush. Just push up and then wipe it off with my towel. And just think about where these trees are going to be. Push up. And so this is just lifting the paint off. And this is kind of that same approach with the clouds. And it just allows me to sort of just let the trees appear rather than have to. Sometimes it can be hard to, that's a good example of just how this is working. It's hard to paint trees over the top of a sky, and it's hard to paint around trees when you're working on the sky, so it's just something I'm trying to do. And just lifting the paint off. So kind of got the trees established there, and same thing over here, just lifting some of that paint off and just pushing up. Okay, let's just start with that and just let it be for right now. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's start with the color of the trees. So over here we've got some ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, And then I added orange to this, and that gives it some warmth. And what I'm going to do now is get coverage. So thin, just try to get these colors represented. Do I ever use white canvases anymore, or are they always primed? So I always prime the canvas with gesso. With acrylics, I like to get the canvas a tone of color now. And this is just burnt sienna and thinner that I scrubbed on with a shop towel. And I like that because it allows me to start more thin, as I was saying, and kind of let the color of this shine through. If I was working with acrylics, I would just add burnt sienna to the gesso. And it also, when I'm working on, revealing certain areas, kind of this unique approach that I'm talking about with the clouds, just for an example, I can push up. If I take a dry brush, I can push up and just kind of remove it. And instead of it being very intrusive and white, that warmth is still there, and that kind of helps me. So I do like to just start with this toned canvas just to keep things nice and warm. And I think as I change my process and my techniques, just things like that just develop and kind of just change over time. But yeah, I do like toning the canvas first. It is very beneficial, especially when painting a scene that's alla prima or plein air, wet on wet. When you're layering, so with acrylics, it may not be as important, but I feel like it simplifies things. Okay, so that's just a good way to start there. And I'm going to pick up some of this black and some of the blue here. So it's a dark color and the edge of our river. So we're just going to start with the darks. And just scrub these darks in. So we have some soft reflections of some of the brush on the shore. And I'm going to just continue with that color since I've got it on the brush. I'm going to add some kind of this middle gray here to that. No, this is not a commission, just for myself. Again, I love working on my large detailed, my focused work. I have a real personal mission with those large paintings, and a story that I'm trying to tell over many works and many years perhaps with those large paintings. And I've just been wanting to get back to some smaller works and just ways for me to exercise my skills and try to educate myself in certain things. So these are more so, they're personal projects, something more in the lines of a color study, but it's always hard to keep it just that. They do get a little more detailed sometimes. Will I add wildlife? Maybe, but probably not. Just kind of focusing again on how I do things and why, and just to try and take something away from it. Alright, now I'm gonna pick up more of that gray, in fact. Kind of a blue-gray. Yeah, it might be a little bit too bright. That's okay, we'll stick with it for right now. And I'm going to add some orange and white to that. That's what I got here. And add more white. So this is just warming it up and lightening it up. Maybe a little bit more blue into that. Nice soft glow. Okay, I'll wash my brush again. And this time I'm going to pick up some of this blue-gray. It's just a lighter version. It's got a little more blue to it. And I kind of mix together these two. A blue-gray, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, some white. More blue though. Nice and cool. And you know, before I even get into that, I'm washing my brush again. And think about some color of the brush along the shore. Add some cad yellow deep to that, and then some red. A little bit of white. Just kind of dull it, brighten it. Just kind of push that color up into the white. And just work my way along the shore. Wasn't sure if I wanted to add the snow first, so that's kind of why I'm going into this color. But I kind of just push that color into the snow. Do I always use Gamsol? Yeah, that's kind of the only thinner I've been using as of late. I haven't tried many other kinds, but it's usually what I stick with. So just brightening this up, adding some more magenta into it. And I'm going to take some more of this red, mix it in with some yellow, darken it down a bit. Kind of get this color over here. Some red willows. None of these colors have to be what I'm left with. I can kind of always go back in and adjust them, but just want to get in the ballpark. That's kind of the first goal. So this is more orange. And so you can see, as I work across, some of that tone of the canvas just kind of remains, and that's helpful, especially again when just kind of trying to finish a painting in one sitting. Just letting that color work for you rather than feeling like you have to really create that color with paint and your brush, and kind of just reveal certain details automatically with what's underneath. Okay, I'm going to pause there on that color. And wash off my brush. I'm going to go back into that nice bluish color here. First, just kind of get some coverage. Almost there. And even though I'm going to have some brighter highlights along here, just going to scrub this color in. It's just always better to, at some point, get the canvas or the panel covered. I always take my time with it because I have a habit of getting ahead of myself, and I think some can work very well by just covering the canvas immediately, and it's just not, I feel like, how my brain works, so to speak. And it's important to listen to. It's important to switch things up. If something's not working, just try something different. So we've got some brush back here, and I'm just working this color up into some of these marks, and it's going to look like that snow just sort of fades and drifts off into that brush. So I'm just laying the groundwork. Okay. So the sun kind of comes like this, and we have some shadowing in the snow here. And just kind of scrub in. When doing a commission piece, how long do you have to wait before varnishing? I think that's a complicated question. Depends on the varnish. There's removable varnishes which allow the painting to continue to breathe, and that's like Gamvar, and that could be applied, and I've done it many times in a month or so, but the thickest part of the painting needs to be hard, needs to be firm, and they recommend a fingernail test, and that's just what Gamblin recommends, where you push your fingernail into the paint, and if it gives whatsoever, it's just not ready yet. Permanent varnishes can require up to a year, but it's not super necessary to have a permanent varnish. They're both going to have a similar appearance. It's just that a removable varnish, perhaps the owner of the piece 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, they could have it restored, meaning just the varnish removed easily and replaced with a permanent varnish at that time. But I've had good luck just following what Gamblin recommends with their removable varnish. I know it's a popular choice. Some really push that and varnish much sooner. Just add some orange into this. Do I recommend Gamblin 1980 or Artist Grade? for painters who are still learning. I think that there are qualities to artist grade paint more so than just maybe the archivalness or the longevity of the paint, the quality. I do think they can work differently. So my personal thought on student grade versus artist grade is, of course it's a good idea if you're selling your work not to use things like student grade paint, but I also just think that the higher quality paint, they work differently, and they kind of manipulate differently on the painting surface, and I do think there's advantages to working with a high quality paint, even if you're not looking to sell. So I personally would probably stick with the highest quality you can afford. I started out with just the Gamblin Artist oils, just because that they were more on the affordable side. But still very good quality. Okay, so just mixing up some nice light peach color, almost the same as what's the tone of the board here. So just continue with these warm peach tones. And I actually ran out of white, so I'm going to go ahead and just re-up that. And just give you a chance to show you what I do with my paint mixtures, medium that I add. Again, I like the liquid impasto, and I always try to stay under 20%, so I get out a little bit and about like that. And then I always add quite a bit of thinner. My thinner's a little dirty today, but that's okay. Just give the white some warmth. And just mix in the medium. So a good amount of thinner really loosens it up. I think the consistency of your paint is also something that you need to build a relationship with. It's a hard thing to answer. How thin should you make your paints? I think just so much. I use Gamsol thinner. Just so much of what should be done or what shouldn't be done in regards to the paint color. I think just kind of depends on your individual needs and purposes. I'm adding some yellow into this white. And then I'm going to start blending that right into the water. Doesn't look like water yet, but we're getting there. I have used the Liquid Original. I have used that a lot in the past. That was kind of my primary medium for a while. I'm kind of just mixing into this color and now just blending it back into the work I just did. And there's some ice along the shore that I want to try and depict here. And I do like the Liquid Original. It really makes for some nice consistency when you're working. I just found it, for my purposes, a little too thin, and I feel like I ran into a lot of issues with layering. I think when painting and working in layers, the Liquid Original is very good at that. Painting similar to perhaps how you would in acrylic painting, where you get a block in, let it dry, go back in, work it, and then let it dry, and then maybe go back in a third time, finish with some of the details. But I've really been enjoying working more alla prima. I've been trying to, especially with these paintings here, these shorter style, smaller color studies, ways that I can practice and learn myself. I've just found more so that I enjoy trying to do my best to see how far I can take it with one layer. And the Liquid Original has given me a lot of problems when I'm trying to stack paint onto itself without it mixing together. So I personally don't like it for alla prima style painting, and that's just why I've been sticking with the impasto more so lately. Mix it up. Color that's kind of in between the two right here, and just going right along the shore. Mixing some brown into that. And then right in the back, want it to cut back the other way. Alright. Pick up some darker color. Mix that into the same color I used along the shore. And right above what I just added, take take this dark color and just send it up, leaving behind some of that darkness right against the ice. Getting into the fun part now. Now is when things are going to start to take shape, start to build those details. Blend it into the snow a little bit. Yeah, I've heard that too about linseed oil. I've tried using linseed oil, but I just wasn't a fan. Again, it was just too thin for me. But I don't know a lot about that personally. Somebody else does. Feel free to answer that. But I think generally it can, especially if you add too much to your paint mixture. So just taking this dark brown and just playing with it against the snow. Okay, the last thing that I need to do is cover the canvas over here, the panel. I keep saying canvas. And I just want to go right into some of these colors right here. I'll just continue to utilize what I have. And I'm going to add some of this orange and white to this. A little more of the orange. So we're just going to try to get a step between these two colors that I added. Just about covered. Now that we've got everything covered up, I'll start going back in and adding some more paint, and working our way towards the finish. Okay, so I'm going to wash my brush. I'm going to go back up to this color that I had initially for the trees. And just start to darken this. Utilize some of the black here that I made, and I'm going to add some burnt sienna to that. Warm it up. Add some orange to this. Really warm it up. And as I get some of the trees up into the sky, it'll start to blend in, and it's not ideally what I want because it starts to desaturate my nice dark color here, but it starts to lift it up. So I'm not going to go too far into the sky. I'm not going to totally finish these trees, and be careful as I'm going up into this yellow. For now, might switch brushes before I try doing that. I was actually standing at this creek taking pictures. So a few weeks ago, it was about, well, just after sunrise. And of course this is right by West Yellowstone. We were going to go to the Wolf Discovery Center, and I started hearing all these wolves howling in the distance, and my first thought was like, oh wow, we're getting close and I can hear the wolves, and get back into the car, and you start realizing like, well, we're still like 8 miles from town. Definitely we're wild. It was pretty cool. They sure get going sometimes, and especially against the park like this, they're so comfortable in their element. Alright, so that is looking pretty good for the trees for now. And yeah, all the videos, they're just posted to the channel and saved. So yes, they're always there. Okay. I'm going to take some white. A little bit of yellow and orange. And get some highlights along the snowbank. Go back into some of the gray here. It's kind of the back and forth process I find myself often in. And just pulling that away from the shore. Darkening the water a little bit. Tricky area through here. Just gonna try to navigate this best I can. I'm gonna go back into some of the color of the willows, the brush, take some red and some orange. Start to get some thicker paint and just continue on. So now is where kind of the work that you do early starts to really aid you in shaping some of these things. It just starts to just disappear in the background. At the same time, just kind of gives you a head start to all these different features. And just kind of pull that up into some of the trees. Same thing over on this side. And as I lift that up, you can see it starts to pick up some of that color from up above, and that kind of automatically becomes some of the shadows. Have I ever been interrupted by a predator while painting? No. Do not believe so, thankfully. The wolves will leave you alone. Cats will leave you alone as well. They're really fearful of humans. But bears, not so much. Very defensive. So this is just kind of poking and lifting up, and that's just creating some nice texture in the distance. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. I'll wash off my brush again. I'm going to pick up some orange. This has got orange white, just a touch of magenta to it. And just to begin the process of that sun. Can be nice and bright. Okay, just gonna leave that right now. And I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and start working on some of the snow again. So this has got a little blue in it. It's got some warmth to it as well. Just a light, mild off-white. And push in, just let that rock off. And sometimes in that warmth layer underneath, as I push and pull away, that warmth kind of just starts to emerge underneath, and that's where it can be beneficial, having a toned surface. Modern Bob Ross, I don't know about that. I think he'd have about 7 of them finished by now. Be looking at me like, the heck you waiting on? Okay. I'm gonna pause there and go back into some of the blues again. Okay. Yeah. A little bit better tone there. A little bit brighter. That's nice and easy. No need to rush. Do I ever use acrylics? Yeah, I mean that was how I got started into painting, and I used them for many years, and not that I felt limited with them, because I know there's just so much capabilities in acrylics that just felt like I was more intrigued with oils, and a lot of mysteries around oils, and just once I got into it and started using oils, I really found very quickly, and I'm sure many can relate, just how steep the learning curve is and how much there is to learn. And even to this day, I think that's what keeps me so interested with oils, is it just feels like I have so much to go, so much to learn, and just want to continue exploring the possibilities of what can be done with the medium. And so just really enjoying that part of the process. I used to think that I couldn't work as fast with oils, but I think as I got more comfortable, I began to learn that I could actually do things more efficiently if approached in a certain way. And more in a one sitting approach, but I do layer from time to time, but I really strive to accomplish what I can in a single layer. And I feel like a lot of times I can get certain things done, not always, but a lot of times I can get certain things done more easily working this way with oils rather than acrylics. Pick up more orange in that, I think. Even more. Yeah, thanks, Judy. Yeah, just more feeling. I kind of feel the same. I think it's easier to tell the story that I'm trying to tell, just in the way that brush strokes emerge, and just become more comfortable with the medium, I think. I hate recommending one way or the other, though. I think it's really a personal experience, and just so much to do with what you're trying to accomplish personally. And there's so many acrylic artists out there that are just out of this world good, and I don't think one way or the other is necessarily better, but on an individual level, it's, for me, I just find it easier. So just going back and forth to all these colors, trying to get the right mixture. It's hard because you've got some blues and you've got some warm, very warm orange yellow tones, and when they mix together they get dirty looking. They can look yellow, green, whatever. So I'm trying to take my time with these areas. And just, you can kind of just keep playing with it, and then eventually something seems to work out, and then you just kind of follow that and continue with it until you feel like you've exhausted that. And if these yellows and blues do ever mix together, if you're kind of facing a similar situation, just using some magenta and white and just kind of bring that back in the other direction. Yes, so I'm using a very light touch. It's a good question. Very light with the brush right now, and as I pick up the rolls of paint, I try to just get a good angle on it, not straight on, and I'm just trying to just let it roll off. And it is a tedious process. So like I said, things can mix together pretty easily, and these colors do not like each other. There's just a lot of back and forth until you feel like you got it, and sometimes just taking the color out of it and trying to mix more of a gray can help. But a lot of times when you look at the shadows, and well, they're blue, and this is kind of some warm tones, and so I'm going to get blue and I'm going to get something warm, and then they just don't play together very nicely. And so then sometimes just realizing, well, maybe that blue should be more gray, maybe those warmer tones, especially in the transition areas, should be more red. Pick up some red. There's never anything wrong with going more, giving more warmth to different shades than not. And so sometimes just adding some of that red can just, even though it makes it warmer than maybe you were thinking, it accomplishes kind of the same thing. So when I'm working with oils and I'm painting in this regard, when wet on wet, if things become muddy, sometimes, it's a good question, thank you, Judy. Sometimes I'll either just wipe it away, and that can be done with just my brush and just pushing against the brush hairs and just kind of lifting some of that off, and then trying to go at it again. Other times, if it appears kind of green or yellow, and just mixing in some light pink gray can kind of neutralize that. But if things become too dark, sometimes you just have to just kind of swipe off the paint and lift it off and just try again, because it can be difficult. You can leave it, let it dry. I prefer not to. And some of those things are just part of the learning process, and lifting the paint off and going at it again. That I did that a lot. I don't do it as much anymore. I feel more comfortable as I continue to work, but definitely no shame in that. So right in the bottom edge here, just again, I try to just pick up some magenta and just use that to try and bridge the gap between the yellows and the blues. Just continuing to work on some of these highlights. Very subtle. Alright, clean my brush off again. And I'm going to pick up some of the blue tone again. Shadows in the snow. A little shade darker than that. Yeah. Just kind of drift that snow up into the brush again up here. Okay. Clean my brush off again. And I think I'm going to work on that water a little more. So I'm going to darken, and I'm going to add some of this warm color I use for the trees. A little bit of orange in that. Don't want it quite as blue. And carefully go along the shore. And I'm going to blend this up. So, a little more paint. I like that. A little bit of orange in that. About right. Just continuing to mix that same color. Nice and soft. Just wash off my brush one more time here. And I'm going to pick up a darker tone here. Keep it warm, adding a little bit of the orange into that. just kind of pulling this dark paint into the creek here. Rinse off my brush again. And go back to the snow. Is it easier to blend because of the impasto and thinner? I feel like I've found that the impasto keeps things more opaque, and the more fluid of a medium you use, the more transparent some of the layers get. And I do think that the opaqueness of the paint and keeping it nice and sticky is, I would say yes, that it is easier to blend without having something else go on. But a lot of it is the consistency of the paint, and it's very creamy. It's almost see, something similar to like sour cream, or like a consistency similar to that. But I feel like the kind of the relationship that I've developed with my paints have kind of come through the frustration of dealing with the very same thing, not getting them to blend right, and being frustrated, and just continuing to switch things up and trying different and new things has always kind of helped me. And through that, eventually, I feel like I found a consistency of paint that works for me. I'll take some white and kind of mix it in with this little bit of just a touch of yellow. Start to add this to the creek, really brighten up this area through here. And I'm going to add some red to this, magenta. And just kind of continue with that blend. very softly with the brush. I think a lot of the process I get into kind of this stage and on, I just become softer and softer with the pressure that I apply. Very soft. Okay, I'm going to wash the brush again. Wow, 2 hours already, jeez. Time flies. Okay, so this is just a brighter highlight color. Orange and white, touch of yellow. I think this is one that I'm going to definitely spend some more time on after I step away. Really enjoying piecing together the foreground, the snow. Okay. More yellow now, a little brighter. Go right in the middle of that. All right. Wash the brush real good, and I'm going to get into the area around the sun. So I'm going to take this yellow and white, do I ever use a special white alone? I'll use pure titanium white for some of the highlights occasionally, if that's what you're asking, especially around the sun. I will just do that here in a minute. So a little bit of yellow, and now I'm going to switch to adding some orange to that. Just kind of right in the same mixture. A little magenta now. I'm going to wash the brush again. And pick up some white. Just kind of sweep that right in. I might pick up my dagger brush and get a little more precise with a couple things here. Kind of using the edge of this to just slowly fan this out. And some yellow and white. A lot of the area around the sun will just have to be kind of fine-tuned with time. I think that's going to take more time. Add some white to this yellow and white. I think with this one, I should have painted like I did with the last painting, the colors of the sun before I got into this. But we're all just learning. Learn as we go. So I'm going to grab magenta, orange, get some of the colors of maybe burnt sienna, some of the colors of the brush here. And this is where this Taker Striper brush is really going to start coming in handy for some of the realistic details. This is where details like this, it's really easier to do here when it's paint still wet. Everything just really blends in, flows together nicely. Could give some advice for a beginner. Don't get frustrated. Even though it's very frustrating, I think just understanding that everything leads to a path of learning, and even I myself, I still consider myself deep in the process of learning and figuring it out, and that just never ends. And I think that when I think back when I was getting into painting, I think some of the mistakes that I made, which kind of delayed some of my growth, were trying to tiptoe my way towards a finished painting. And I would use less paint, use very little paint, and I would try to just carefully inch my way, and I would get stuck in all these details. And if I had one piece of advice for someone starting out, it would be just grab a lot of paint and cover the surface and just get into it. Don't try to make it perfect as you begin a painting. Just see what happens as you dive into it, because I think that's just ultimately what has to happen before you make strides in learning how to do it the way you want. It's so difficult to tiptoe your way there to avoid mistakes, because those mistakes are coming, I think, no matter what. And the quicker you just get into it and just start picking up more paint at a time and just trying things, the quicker you run into those mistakes and the faster you learn. And so I've really embraced that. I think it's why I'm really getting into sitting with you, maybe at least once a week, and sitting down and painting these color studies and chatting with everyone. I think that's just really helping me just dive into some of these things myself. Just paintings just don't have to come out perfect for you to advance and progress in your journey and your process. It's a lot of times it's just putting in the reps, just same advice I'm sure someone would give about going to the gym. It's just like, just get into it and start doing reps, because you can't tiptoe your way there to becoming more fit and stronger. It just takes an X amount of reps. And I think the same concept is very similarly applied to painting. You just have to go for it and just keep working at it, and things come. And you start to make sense as you go. And getting back to doing some of these smaller, quicker paintings, it's much the same way why I think so many painters love to do plein air, because it exercises you in the same way as this example. It puts pressure on you, and that pressure is good, because you run into things quicker, and the quicker you run into things in your process, the quicker you hash them out, and the faster you learn, and the more effectively you learn, I think, as well. So I'm taking some of this brighter orange color and I'm going to brighten. It's just a very dirty brown, hint of red, and just brighten up some of the trees through here. Alright. Got some of the yellow and white again. The area around the sun is just, it's really going to take some careful effort here. Again, I think I could have done better by adding more of these colors in early. I'm going to use this brush just to kind of mix the same color that I had in the clouds. Just soften a couple spots. Any advice on painting grasses? That grasses are tough. I think you add the detail last. I think about the colors overall around the grasses and what's behind the grass, and get a base coat of all those colors established, and then using a brush like this one to just kind of detail some of those individual pieces over the top. I think I did a video on grass. It might have been, I think it might have been oils. Pretty sure there's one. How do you get ideas for painting? I think just simply put, I love to spend time outside, and ideas slowly come. The photos that I've been sharing all my reference photos that I take in the wild with the channel members, and I think that kind of in my same way, those photos are what I build as well. Just a large library, and they bring me back to times when I've been out, and they bring me back to the places. I often browse through them, and sometimes I've got pictures from an area, ideas from an area as well, and nothing comes about with it for a long time, and then maybe I'll go somewhere else. I'll snap a couple other pictures, and then something will click. And and then all of a sudden that idea that I had starts to come to fruition as I start thinking about the place that I just was, and some of the photos that I took at maybe a different place, and so many times the paintings, especially the large paintings, are just kind of a composite of different areas, different ideas, and places I've been. When I snapped the photo here, it was just a pretty plain blue sky morning. Not very dramatic, but I really like the creek. And I was just paging through last night some photos of sunsets I've taken, and it just kind of just dawned on me like, oh, it would be really cool if I kind of combine these two ideas. And I think that's what's going to help me by just getting into these color studies more. Is just, it's going to help me work on some of those ideas, and work on the ability to come up with ideas I think at the same time. So I'm just kind of switching to this brush now. I just feel like I've exhausted some of that. The other one. Gonna end up needing more white. So I'm just gonna quickly grab a bit more white here. Just mix some medium, some thinner together. So at this point, when I get to this stage of a painting, it's when I really start to get into thick paint. And I would say that many times in other paintings, I would say the process is always kind of the same. It's hard and it's limiting. to show all of this in just one go on video. But right now is kind of when, as I start to add thicker paint, I feel like things start to become more cohesive and things start to become more real, and I start to lift up some of the highlights, and that starts to set in some of the shadows. And when I'm done here, I'll continue working it, and I will I'll also share that to the membership, just kind of the remaining part. I'll have a time lapse come out that just kind of shows how all of it ends up coming together as well. But I'm gonna keep working it for a little bit. Remember, the more paint that you add to the surface, the brighter and the fuller and more vibrant it's going to appear. And some of the grasses might just kind of disappear, and that's fine too. All just kind of blends together into one big language throughout. A little bit of light right here shining through. And just wondering where I want to go next with this. Wash the brush a bit and take some white and yellow. Just a brighter color here. And so much of this, when I kind of really get into this part, is just changing and manipulating what I have, because as the paint starts to stack up, this is where I feel like not only does it kind of get fun to manipulate as you go, but you just start to get some of those nicer effects to start to take shape. And this is where it really gets exhausting at the same time and gets very repetitive, but I do enjoy it. And I think it really just depends what your personal goals are. You could very easily get to a stage like this and kind of just leave it be. I think that's totally fine. I try to just focus on the light now and just try to think about what could be changed. What could be brightened or darkened. Water looks cold and wet. You know what's funny about this is that all these streams up in this part of the country, the reason they're open as well is because they're all warm spring fed. So I think, gosh, when I was standing at the bank of this creek, I want to say it was -5 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that, and the water, I'm sure it wasn't actually warm, but it felt warm. You could just get in with your bathing suit on. I mean, it would have felt great. Probably about, 40, 50 degrees, still pretty cold, but in comparison, it's pretty crazy. Brighten the water right through here. I'm just going to continue brightening up some of this area right through here. I'll go for a little bit longer here and just continue to make improvements. I feel like so much of it is kind of a hurry up and then take your time. And it's a slow march to the finish now. Wash my brush again. And let's see here. I think I'm going to blend out some of the clouds just a bit. And on the bottom side, pick up more of this yellow and white. And just start brightening up a couple things underneath. Give a little more of a feeling of that sunlight bouncing. making a good sunlight, a good glow. It's all about your organization of the colors. And you know, sometimes it's hard to get it off the first try, but it's important to pay attention to where are the yellows, the oranges, the magentas, and you know, they should go from white, yellow, orange, magenta, and so on, whether it's in a small area or just overall in a general sense. It kind of helps me that way. But the more you just kind of play with it, and softer things can kind of get. Comes with the clouds, while at the same time leaving some of those details that make it look random and real. And this paint just sort of flows into itself. And just continuing to mix some of these light peachy warm colors. So a lot that I'm adding is really showing the physical texture, and then some of the physical texture just kind of just fades away and blends into some of the softer areas that are already existing. Wash off my brush. Grab some of this yellow and white again. Yeah, thanks for joining, Judy. Have a great day. thicker paint again. Some clouds just floating around the sun. Mostly white, just a touch of yellow. All right. Some thick paint right over the sun again. Just kind of moving the paint around, playing with it. Can always just keep making changes. And I'm gonna darken a couple clouds here down low. A little too dark. So a lot of the detail that I add, I can just start to get rid of if I want to, by just going right over it. It all just kind of blends together if need be. Wash the brush. Couple highlights through here. And remember, everything that gets close to the sun should just kind of get progressively brighter, warmer. So a couple of these spots just continuing to add to that color. The music is don't know exactly. Each artist, a large playlist I got off of a paid service that I use, which I've discussed in the past. I use Epidemic Sound for the YouTube channel, and they've got a lot of good music. I think you can browse and listen to some of it, just can't use it for anything, even if you don't have a subscription. Glad you like it though. Okay, a little more brightness in a couple spots, and I might have to just step aside. But hopefully that gives you an idea of just how I'll continue to poke at it and some of the things I'll continue to do. It's been a fun one. I think my big takeaway is work on that sun. You know, I've stepped away from sunsets. I've been doing a lot over the years and not quite as many lately, and I'd like to get back into some. I'm going to be doing some in my larger paintings coming up, and so it's good practice. I think I definitely need to take care of the colors around the sun like I did the other day prior to getting into any of the darker tones, but it's good exercise. And I really want to get better at these one session paintings, and it's just something I haven't done a lot of lately, and I just think there's a lot to learn. I'm really bouncing around now. I'm going to take just a darker blue. So I'm forgetting about some of the grass that I added. A lot of that was just to see where I was at with it, see what it kind of looks like as I add it. Sometimes that helps me see where I'm at and how I feel about it. And I'm not afraid to just go right over the top. So much of this can, again, just be worked right over. And I'll add grass back in at a later point as well. Can always just add it back. But sometimes this is where the best brush work comes in, because paint starts to get thick enough where it starts to really flow together nicely, and it starts to create different effects, and that's a lot of times what I'm looking for. And again, I'm most concerned about value, composition. The detail is secondary for something like this. I do think detail is important for telling at least the stories that I like to tell. But sometimes, especially when you're working quick, and when you're working something like, take plein air for example, you really have to avoid getting trapped into the details, because at the end of the day, a good painting is represented by value and color more so than the detail. But as I bounce around from different areas, that's when I really start to see other parts of the painting differently and more for what they are. And so that's why I'm never afraid to just jump back into a certain area and keep poking at it and working at it, because sometimes it just needs a little more adjustment. And one of the last things I might do before I jump off here is get some white and yellow. And I'm just going to blend this into the upper part of this guy. Just lift up this area right here. Carefully around some of the work. I'm going to want more orange, I believe. Around some of this sun. Again, it's going to take some fine tuning. I need to really sit down, take my time with this sun. There's just a couple things I wanted to try and accomplish, but it's pretty difficult. Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Seen it all come together, and then the shadow changes. Yeah, that can really do a lot. And the camera, I don't know if I've got the camera adjusted right. That might just be my bias. I feel like it looks better than what I see on the screen. But I think overall, it's looking good. I think I'm going to take a break from it, and I'll have the time lapse kind of released when I finish some of the rest of it. But overall, it was a fun thing to work on. The clouds, I'm not sure if I'm 100% happy yet with what I have for the clouds. I wanted, some of it might just be I need to kind of break some of it up. And then in the reverse way. Just trying to mix sort of the color of that sky. And just breaking up some of it. Lots of fine details you can just keep playing with. Every little bit helps. I think taking a painting from here to the next level is or the next step, whether it's detail or realism, is just time and patience and just going through and criticizing everything that you've got and criticizing why you have it there, and really asking yourself, can I make a change? And if I do make a change, is that going to put it in the right direction, take it in the right direction? It's kind of feel like what I go through in my head. Yeah, good wider format composition, definitely. So, I think one thing that might be kind of fun, one of the things I stand back and usually judge myself on right now is the composition, and like what are some things that could be adjusted. I think it'd be cooler to have the crick just roll out on this bank a little more. but it can continue to be changed. And I think that's the benefit to working thin to thicker paint, because those thinner layers are just easily covered and easily changed. And for me, the way I work, I feel like it helps me gives me the breathing room later in the process if I feel like I need that. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for everybody who stayed through the whole stream. I appreciate it. Thank you for the support, and I will take a break here and I'll continue poking at this, and I'll have the time lapse and what have you come out when that's finished. So thank you all again. I hope you have a great weekend, great rest of your day wherever you are, and we'll see you next time.